Okay, so now we're recording. We've been talking here for 30 minutes. Covered a lot, so I got to kind of refresh here. And we have a couple more people that are going to join in. Our great friend and um, you know, co-posterity force of righteousness, Grant in Tennessee couldn't make it tonight, so he's sending somebody else to join in with us. This is one of the things that's difficult for me, all is when I'm going on the roll like I was before I started recording, and then I start over. It's like I got to kind of reboot. So we were just joined by Samsung, and I'm wondering what's the name of the person that was going to join us?
Get a name?
Did you get a name from that person?
No.
No? Okay, that was Clinton that just joined back in. Okay, so the other person hasn't come in yet. Hasn't come in just yet. So all these points about the fact that on the one hand, there's a definitive posterity. Certain people created the nation for themselves and their posterity. Can't get around it. It's a fact. Can't be argued. There it is.
Jennifer, she said she just joined.
Okay. Then you have just joined, and she didn't join yet. Tell her I don't see her as joined. Oh, wait, I do see her. Is she Samsung? Yeah, okay. Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. Jennifer, if you want to unmute for a second, you can say a few words. If Grant had you come in, I'm curious to know, did he just invite you to come in and listen to the meeting, or were you kind of somebody that was going to come in and speak maybe on some issues?
You're not Josh either.
And I'm not Josh. I'm Josh's dad, Michael, by the way.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure this out. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Great. Jennifer, right?
Okay, yeah, I'm Jennifer, a long schoolmate of Grant's. So we go way back. We've been on this since 2010, I think. So about
Okay.
15 years learning everything.
Great. Jennifer, hold on one second. Let me say this. I meant to say this when I started recording just a few minutes ago. We are not acting as attorneys. We're not providing legal advice or legal opinions. We're not providing any sort of legal service here. We're just a bunch of free thinking American men and women who are discussing our personal understanding and comprehension of law and the Constitution and treaties and our rights. And we're just having a discussion on those issues. And we believe every man and woman has the ability to think for themselves on where they wish to stand on these issues. So just to clarify that, we're not acting in any sort of attorney capacity or legal capacity. We're not providing legal services, etc. All right.
Agree.
Okay.
Yes,
So
that's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah. So go ahead, Jennifer. You say you've been at it since 2010 with Grant. Awesome. So you're totally familiar with. Totally.
Yes, we've learned a lot along the way. It's been a journey.
Yep. And before you came on and before I started recording, just to kind of bring you up to speed, I guess, kind of started out tonight talking about how I believe that a lot of these movements like David Lester Straight and Anna von Reitz and America's Assemblies and these different patriotic groups that have been going on for the past few years really was God's first step at kind of baby steps, kind of getting people to wake up and start to see some things. There were a lot of missing points and spottiness and things, still questions. I indicated earlier, to me, this is like we're at that next level now. We're eating real food. This is the ultimate truth. This is the ultimate truth. I established, at least before I started recording, so I'll do it again for the record now, that the ultimate bottom line here is that there was a certain group of men and women that established the United States of America, and they did so for themselves and their posterity, meaning for their children and their children's 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 children, just as if anybody that went out and bought 10,000 acres of property and put a fence around it, put it in trust and said, this is for me and my posterity, my children and their children and their children. That's exactly the same thing for the United States of America. It was literally created in that fashion. So as time went on, obviously, it's been infiltrated, it's been hijacked. The enemy has endeavored to take it over through wars, through banking, through fraud, through many different avenues. But what's the big news now is that Americans, and there's millions of Americans right now that don't even know what they have. They don't know who they are or what they have. They have by law, by treaty, by Supreme Court rulings, they have all rights, privileges, and immunities. And it makes perfect sense because their patriarchal grandfathers were granted that, and they were granted that for themselves and their posterity, and they are the posterity, and they have it. It's vested rights. It's blood, privity of blood. And they don't know it. This is the big truth that's coming out now. I'm excited about it. Everybody that's on here I know is excited about it. My son is excited about it. Grant's awesome. And I'm glad that you're here, Jennifer, so you can share your insights. So one of the things I was kind of trying to address is that there's some little nuances where you'll have the people that are saying, what? Because I'm not related to George Washington, I don't have rights. You know, that's not the case. But we have to look at it in context with law. I was talking about how you'll hear all the time the politicians say we're a nation of laws. We're a nation of laws. So long as we are functioning in the confines or construct of governments made by man, there are laws and rules and regulations, right, that apply to that government. So for the people who say I'm a sovereign, which again, I address the fact that some people do that under God. God created me. I'm a sovereign. I'm of the earth. God created me. I'm a sovereign in God. But then there's other people that will even take that sovereign stance and reject God. They won't acknowledge God. They'll just say, who's anybody to tell me anything? I'm a sovereign man or woman. And they're entitled to take that position too. So any man or woman is entitled to proclaim that they're a sovereign. But how far are they going to get with their rights and their privileges and their blessings and their assistance and different things within a government system? They're going to be subject to the laws, the rule of law. So the rule of law, as it pertains to posterity, is different than the rule of law as it pertains to 14th Amendment citizens. And we've covered this in other videos. We're going to have to go over it again and again and again. But obviously, at the time this nation was founded by our forefathers who founded it for themselves and for us, their posterity, there were other peoples. You know, there were blacks here, slaves, other people living here that were not state citizens. They weren't part of the posterity. They didn't create the nation. So the Supreme Court had to navigate, how do we reserve and protect the rights of these founders that created this nation, and kind of facilitate these other people that are, wanting their rights or their whatever they're crying out for, which ultimately led to civil rights and things of that nature. So this is where there's some fingers of intricacy and delicacy that are going to need to be explained and met out as this whole movement is going forward. Obviously, we are the first in terms of being an organization. Grant had long said, the blacks, I think it's the NAACP, is it, right, for the blacks, or the Jews, right? That don't be an anti-Semite. Right. There's these different organizations and agencies that are out there trying to protect women and protect the gays and protect blacks and protect certain groups of people. Well, guess what? The posterity is a certain group of people, and they have rights and privileges and immunities that should be protected, and they are protected by law. So this is rising now. It's coming to the surface that the millions of Americans that exist that don't even know this need to start waking up and grabbing a hold of this reality of what they actually lawfully are entitled to, what they have, what is rightfully theirs. And Grant would say it like this: we are the owners of this land. We own the USA. We are the owners. We are the lawful owners. We created the government. We are their sovereign. They work for us. So often we hear American people, oh, the government works for me. Well, I mentioned earlier that the Supreme Court has ruled that a 14th Amendment citizen is property and a franchise of the federal government. Person might not like to hear it, but that's the law. That's what is in place. That's how they are treating people. So this is where, again, there might be people that will say, well, to hell with that. I'm not a 14th Amendment citizen. I don't want to be, and they'll revoke their 14th Amendment citizenry. Now we got more delicacies, more delicate issues arising, because if the posterity are lawfully entitled to all rights, privileges, and immunities by treaty, by law, by Supreme Court rulings and findings, whereas the 14th Amendment citizens are not, just because they say I'm not a 14th Amendment citizen anymore doesn't make them a posterity either. It puts them in a bit of a conundrum where what do they have now? What are their rights going to be? So
Right.
we're going to unravel this, and at that point, I'll let you speak, Jennifer. You can add some insights on all that you know concerning being able to address that issue.
Well, I'm not as well spoken as Grant, and I can't rattle everything like he does. He's got a photographic memory, I think, because he can just snap back and give you the, the law, the amendment, the constitutional article, whatever it is. And I'm not as good at that as he is. I mean, I follow him, and I'm pretty well read on it. I just can't, speak very well. But if I can, if I can offer something, I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah, please feel free to, just as a woman, just, based on your own personal feelings and understanding and views and opinions and ideas and understanding of it all, go ahead and express that. However you feel comfortable doing it.
Well, I'm like you. I have done my genealogy, so back to 1774. So I know that I'm one of the posterity, and it's really hard for me to watch TV. I guess is a really good way to say it, because for years, I just knew what they were saying wasn't truth. And now we've found ourselves personally with many members of my family having different issues and dealing with the court systems. And it's so upside down. And, I don't agree with our current court systems, but they are what we have to deal with. So I found it, just a personal struggle to try to figure out, what do I do now? Learning the power of the affidavit has been huge for me. And I've had some successes with that. That's probably number one, what people need to learn in battling some of this. But, it does go back to just exactly what you said. The laws, the whole system has been, excuse me for saying it this way, bastardized in a way, because they did take from us and they did an overlay of what should have been there, the republic, because they came in with the second constitution, they changed it up, and now we're having to find our way out of this. I agree with David Strait and them. I think they came out with a lot of simple things, but you can get caught up in so much, and there's things that, this one did or that one didn't do. Anna von Reitz, they all have a different path sometimes, so to speak, yet they're all on the same journey. So it is really a lot of reading and trying to learn our history. You've got to know what was there before, the switching time cases. Grant speaks a lot of those. That's where they switched everything over. And, oh, excuse me, it takes a lot of weeding through, so to speak, to get to the bottom of it. And I just find at the end of the day, you kind of just got to keep it simple. Got to go back to the basics. Where did it start? What switched it? And then you have to start learning, your amendments, which ones were okay, which ones weren't okay. I think it was the 28th Amendment, Harry Truman, was it Truman? That, when they signed some of these, Congress wasn't even in, is Truman, wasn't even in office, or they weren't in session, I should say. So there's a lot of intricacies to this that people just don't grasp. And when you tell them, they're like, well, they're doing it. So it's just hard. It is so hard to get through this stuff. But thank goodness for Grant, because he does have it all figured out, I think. I think he knows. He's probably one of the most well-read people that I know, and has memorized, so much that he's just a blessing to me. So I'm just kind of been his eyes and ears on a lot of things. I research things for him. The postal rules, the 1952 postal. We've been, looking that up. There's just layers. There's so much, and I wasn't expecting to speak, so I really didn't have anything prepared. But I hope I explained that without just totally confusing people. But that's where I am with this. Um,
You
And
know,
I've talked to other people besides Grant, but so far Grant's got it to me. He's laid more of a case for things than anybody.
absolutely. No, and just you expressing your views is sufficient. That's what I wanted you to do. And I appreciate that. As time goes on, we're going to have more and more and more and more people doing that. There's, I think that it's all coming together. There, because of David Stray. Now, let me just say this. On some of my videos, I've made comments, and sometimes I'm speaking so fast that you might say something and somebody will take it other than the way I meant it. Sometimes I'll just blurt out David Strait, Hannah Von Reitz, and Republic controlled opposition, that they were all working for the Vatican, because all of them, none of them ever talked about posterity. So in a way, I could say that I have a sneaking suspicion. And again, I'm not making that accusation or saying that that's the case. But sometimes, because none of them discuss this ultimate truth, that there was a certain people who clearly established a nation for themselves and their bloodline, their family. They protected it by law, by treaty. They don't discuss that. Sometimes it makes me think, gee, maybe they all are working for the Vatican to keep people distracted from that, because that is the ultimate power. That is we, the people, having the power reality. Those are the people that do have the ultimate power, because they have it by blood, by privity of blood, by law, by treaty. So sometimes, I wonder, are they just kind of working over there for the Vatican to keep people's minds off of this? My son, going to your point about, reading and having it down, my son, boy, it's like if David Strait and Von Reitz and all the people that have been doing this for 40 years are up here, my son is going like, like he's catching up to them in 2 years, and about to, in my opinion, surpassing a lot of them quickly, because he's got excellent reading. He'll stay up all night long, sometimes for days at a time, and every day, Dad, did you know this? Dad, did you know that? Hey, look at this. Hey, look at that. Hey, look.
Isn't
He's
it
just like,
exciting?
what's that?
I said, that's so exciting when,
It
when
is.
your family starts to get it. Now, my boys aren't, they're just letting mom do her thing, my daughter too, but they'll have a ticket or, and they're always running to me, what do I do? And I'm like, well, I really don't know, because I hadn't fought a lot of stuff in court, but we've had a few small successes and I'll take them. But it's just wonderful to see somebody have the passion, and that's what's driving him. He's got a love and a passion to know his heritage, his truth, and that's just beautiful to see.
Yeah. And I think I said it before you came on, kind of where I'm at in this is being able to articulate things where people can get it. That's what I've endeavored to do at TAPS, right? It's one page. It makes the case that, hey, your posterity, you got privity of blood, here's the definitions, here's the reality, here's the treaty, here's the law, here's the Supreme Court rulings. This is the truth. So now that we're there, there's two things going on here. We need all the Americans who are posterity to wake up and join us. And when I say join us, nobody has to pay 1 penny to be a part of this organization. But we're like the NRA, we're like the Heritage Foundation. They all raise millions of dollars a year from their founders. Well, we should too, and we're going to need it, because we may well be navigating in the world courts if we have to. Because if the Supreme Courts don't make proper rulings in favor of posterity, then we'll be taking them to the world courts, and we'll be getting the dream team of attorneys that know all the laws and the Constitution, and constitutional attorneys working for us too. We are going to reestablish what is rightfully ours. That's the passion I have, and I'm going to do everything I can to get that point across and wake people up to the reality, like I did at the bigvirushoax.com. Wake them up to the reality of what's the truth about viruses, what they are and what they're not, the true science behind it. What's in the V word? What are they? When did they start doing that? Why did they start doing it? Who's behind it? Why are they doing it? Are there population concerns in this world? Are there biological weapons that are going on and are being called V words when really they are causing people to be sterile or to get sick or to end up in the hospital or to die? What kind of agendas are going forth here that need to be exposed? That's what the bigvirushoax.com was all about. But that led to righteousarmy.org, where I was like, man, where's the 300 that are going to stand up for their rights? So I started putting forth an effort to wake up people county to county, state to state, What are we going to do? We need to organize in our communities. We need to stand with one another. We need to have 300 arm in arm that are going to the public beach the next time they try to shut it down based on a false, alleged invisible enemy called what, right? I mean,
Mhm.
so how are we going to stand for our rights if we're not united and organized? So those of us, and then this lends itself again to this issue of the founding fathers said the United States of America was a nation founded by godly people for godly people, by a religious people for religious people. The whole issue of morality is a factor. Responsibility, godliness, it goes into play. So we know that they're dividing the world based on moral issues, dividing it on every issue you can think of. I always say the three major psychological operations they have are the anti-Semite. I call it the Jew psyop. Nobody even knows what a Jew is or who a Jew is or where they came from. Is it an
Right.
ethnicity? Is it a religion? I mean, I laid that open on my websites. I call it the Jew psyop, and I explain it all for what it is biblically. And then there's the racism psyop. Nobody hates somebody else because of the color of their skin or the language they speak or even their sexual preference. We just don't want it thrown in our face, and we want to be able to preserve our own culture, our own racial identity and integrity, our own gender identity. We don't hate the others. They can live however they want, but they shouldn't be throwing it into our face, into our lives, into the lives of our children who are vulnerable and impressionable in kindergarten, right? So there's these conflicts. I've endeavored to address them all very articulately. The LGBTQ, the homophobia. These are psychological operations to divide people and confuse people. And oh, you're a racist. Oh, you're homophobic. Oh, you're a bigot. To make people afraid to be they've woven it in such a way as it correlates to the truth. There's truth that cannot be spoken unless you are unraveling these issues of anti-Semitism and homophobia and the LGBT community and racism and what race is. Unless you unravel all that, it binds the truth. It puts the truth in a mire. And that's why they've come up with all that stuff, so that people can't really discuss the truth of these issues. So that's what I've been endeavoring to do, is to make these issues clear. And I've done it on the websites at The Big Virus Hoax, HOAX, thebigvirushoax.com, the ultimate website for issues regarding viruses, what they are, what they're not, the jabs, what's in them, what that's all about, the bioweapons, Righteous Army, an effort to get people county to county, state to state to organize and work and become united in their communities. And then that led to really, again, kind of a not having all the answers with David Straight and Anna von Reitz in the assemblies. And why are people still struggling? Grant talks about that all the time. He says, I look at all these patriot movements, they ain't getting anywhere, and they're not going to get anywhere because that federal jurisdiction, that federal plane of jurisdiction, has every right to be doing what they're doing.
Right.
The question is, are there a people who are their sovereigns, just as that federal plane is acting as a sovereign over 14th Amendment citizens? But who put them in place? We, the posterity, did. Because I can say I did because my grandfather did. My father's 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 father did it. By privity of blood, I did it. My family did it. My bloodline did it. So anybody that can say that, those are the people we're trying to get to unite and organize as an organization, which again is why on the website, the information's all there. It's for free. Nobody has to pay a penny. We certainly are asking for assistance financially, $100 membership fee. If we had 1 million people do that, we'd have $100 million, which would mean that our committee, because it would all be on the up and up, we'd have our, treasurer and our bank account and our funds and accountability and the whole 9 yards, but we'd have the resources to fight back, to go to DC, to get the dream team constitutional attorneys, to go to the world courts, Hagues if we have to, if the Supreme Court is making unlawful determinations. So that's the whole point of building the organization, which kind of is what I'm spearheading. But again, my son, brilliant with reading, researching, memory retention, being able to recite case law and Supreme Court rulings and US codes. Grant is brilliant with that. And we need more people on our team who are posterity that can do that. And again, Clint in California, I'm sorry, in North Carolina, Clinton was talking last time about, what other strategies can we use to market this with a cartoon or different types of videos or interesting ways of getting this message out there, because the message is clear. There's a people that founded this nation for themselves and their posterity, and lawfully
Yeah.
are entitled to all rights, privileges, and immunities, period. I'll just want to go on and on and on, over and over and over, saying the same thing over and over about how significant and important it is for Americans who are posterity to recognize that. That's first and foremost. But now that second thing, again, that's important to me is we need to make it clear to the ones that would say, what, just because I'm not related to George Washington, I don't have rights? Or for the ones that say, I'm a sovereign, nobody has a right to tell me what my rights are. Well, for them, I say, sorry, if you're operating in the government constraints of a governmental system, it's all about laws, rules, regulations, procedures. That's just how it works. And that's where, again, going back to posterity, the law's on our side. The treaties, the law, the Supreme Court rulings, we're posterity, we're entitled to all rights, privileges, and immunities, because that's what our patriarchal grandfathers who created this nation said they wanted in place. So let's kind of maybe untangle some of that. Some people might say, maybe they're not saying, oh, because I wasn't related to George Washington, or they're not saying I'm a sovereign. They're saying, well, wait, am I an American? I mean, I've been here for 3 generations. The way I would unravel that one for people is like this. When the founding fathers did create this nation for themselves and their posterity, they knew that their children would have children who would have children who would have children. So they knew there'd be a posterity that's going out. But they also, obviously, common sense would tell us, they knew that there would be many other people coming into this nation who were not posterity and who had nothing at all to do with founding this nation. So if they had nothing to do with the establishment of the nation, and they were establishing it for themselves and their posterity, then where do these people stand? Frankly, that issue was addressed by the 14th Amendment because it was a question that inevitably had to come about at that time, because they knew, hey man, I'm gonna be dead and gone in 30 or 40 years. We need to lock this in. I mean, we're doing this for ourselves and our posterity. This is our nation. Other people are going to be coming in that aren't going to be part of that. And let's look at the ones that are here now, for instance, the blacks. They don't have a legal standing. They're not state citizens. They didn't create this nation. So the 14th Amendment came into being primarily because of blacks. And at that time, that's kind of all you had was the state citizens, the ones that founded the nation, them and their children, their posterity. But the blacks were here because they were working. Again, I've pointed out in other videos, and I have to do this over and over too. The Hollywood has done a grotesque job of bastardizing, perverting, blowing out of proportion the slavery. They've turned it into a brand, slavery. Crack the whip, nigger, get to work, nigger. Like the poor blacks and those white, racist, mean white people. They've really done a job with making it out as if all blacks were just beaten and tortured by the mean white man. That's the Hollywood narrative. The reality is the Moors, who were blacks, were not just even selling their own people, but bringing their people over here as slaves and selling them off, making a profit for bringing them over here because they were bringing workers over here. Many of the people that were here, they had what we would call room and board. They had a place to sleep. They had food to eat every day, and they were working, and they were getting, most of them paid some small salary for, going out in the, collecting the cotton or collecting the tobacco, which were 2 huge crops at the time, right? So they were workers. So whether you want to call them workers or whether you want to call them slaves, what we do know is that Hollywood has blown out of proportion the whole slavery idea, turned it into a Hollywood theme. But there were people here, they were black, they weren't founding fathers, they weren't state citizens, they needed to be accounted for. What about their rights? So they became 14th Amendment citizens. They had to clothe them in a form of citizenship. And again, Grant discusses this issue very well, and he cites Supreme Court cases that are relative to it. But since that happened at that early time, it makes it where we have to navigate through this issue of, well, what about after that? What about white Europeans that came over in the early 1900s, that they might be 3 or 4 generations here, but they're not posterity either. I think Grant would have his own answer to that. I was discussing it actually with my son and Grant earlier. So let me try to bar off of some of those thoughts. And Josh, if you want to chime in on this, the Supreme Court has ruled that we have a right to political self-determination. So some people will run with that and try to use it as a fix-all for, oh, well, I have political self-determination. I'm a posterity. No, you can't become a posterity through political self-determination, but you can determine your political status. So that original status being state citizen, being posterity. Yeah, and I'm trying to, there's, again, Grant would be very articulate and precise on addressing this issue. But when I was talking about it with him today, I was kind of pointing out that, well, couldn't somebody say, I'm choosing a status to not be a 14th Amendment citizen, but to be over here in the Republic? And that would be, I believe, a yes to that. A person could do that. And when we factor in the movements like David Straight, the Anna von Reitz people, the assemblies, these different groups that are saying, we have a right to political self-determination. Well, therefore, they could say, as he tells them to do, rescind or revoke your citizenship, your 14th Amendment citizenship. It would now be incumbent upon the Republic to receive them, right? To me, I see one of the problems we have right now is the fact that the Republic is uninhabited. And when I say uninhabited, I mean the seats. The seats are not inhabited for the government of the Republic for the United States of America. This is what the group, the Republic for the United States of America, has been pursuing for the last 10 years, is to get people back into the Republic. But there's a problem there. I've addressed it many times over with the fact that is that Republic that exists today a controlled opposition movement? Because back in 2010, all these patriots were rising up during the Obama administration to try to take back the Republic. But the word is, particularly from Joseph Gibson, who ran their blog talk radio show for 10 years, that when they were doing that back in 2010, the media came on strong, the government, it became a real heated issue, and people started dying mysteriously, disappearing mysteriously, leaving, dispersing. They broke it up. They broke up that effort to re-inhabit the Republic. But then it had this kind of comeback over the last few years where they're claiming that they have the Republic in place and they're just trying to re-inhabit it. But yet some of the problems with the Republic, now that I've become privy to this new, much more important information concerning the reality of posterity, who are the only people who can inhabit the Republic, the only people that can actually inhabit those seats would be posterity. You cannot have just any Tom, Dick, or Harry that just came over here off the boat and what? They can join the Republic and they can inhabit the seats. No, it can't work that way. It wouldn't work that way. So we're talking about a movement called the Republic for the United States of America, with the interim president being James Geiger and Governor of Colorado, James Carpenter, who I've spoken to at length. All of them were speaking to me quite a bit a couple of years ago, and had a falling out a couple of years ago when I started pointing out concerns I had about it potentially being a controlled opposition, because it seemed to me everything was about this top down, they're in control kind of movement. And every time I discussed common law, or I had Eric Dingus on or Charles Stewart on talking about common law and Exodus 18 model, and the government should be from the grassroots up, the bottom up, they got aggravated with that. It's like they didn't like hearing that. There seemed to be some conflict with that. And one of the big telltale signs for me now is that they were telling governors in the federal territorial plane to step down when they had every right to be there. That was that. If anything, that was a flaw. If the Republic for the United States of America, this message is for you, James Geiger. This message is for you, James Carpenter. This message is for you, Sandy Miriarki. I love all of you guys. I appreciate you all. I don't think you're agents or your spies trying to infiltrate and hijack the Republic and use it for a nefarious purpose. But the question still remains, who's really controlling it? Do you all know who's controlling it? Are the people above you that you know nothing about? What's going on at the top? Who's trying to reestablish a republic so that they can say, hey, we're the government now? Is it a controlled opposition? Who's behind it? There should be total transparency and clarity about all of that. If it's not nefarious, there'd be nothing to hide. So where the Republic was indeed making fallacies, making bad, wrong moves, was in their efforts to tell all the governors to step down when those governors in that federal territorial jurisdiction had every right to be there. They're always going to be there until the Republic is re-inhabited by posterity, who are the owners of the land, who now take back their government, and they can do something to correct the federal government. Right now, the federal government is acting as the authority even over posterity. Posterity are their superiors. The posterities are the sovereigns over the federal government. They need to rise up. The posterity need to re-inhabit the seats in the Republic, and they need to be the ones to take the helm with the Republic for the United States of America. That's the big missing point for that organization, the Republic for the United States of America at this point. That's my message to them in short. They've been invited to come on. They don't come on. So that kind of says a lot too. As we move forward here, guys, tonight we had a few extra people come on. As time goes on, we'll get more and more come on, and hopefully the more and more are going to be posterity, because the posterity, as we've already pointed out over and over, are the ones who have the lawful right to all rights, privileges, and immunities by law, by treaty, by Supreme Court findings. We're going to be establishing more and more references and citing cases and having links to things on the website on another page as time goes on. Right now, it's just a one-page website that people can read down to get the gist of it. But that's the ultimate solution. It's really the ultimate truth with regards to all this stuff that's been going on over the last few years with these movements, patriot movements, and the issues about birth certificates and Cestus QV accounts and fraud in the government, which goes to that earlier point I made, right? Is in theory, all these organizations, David Straight and Anna von Reitz and Eric Dingus and the assemblies and all of those groups were put out to throw all this other stuff out there to keep people's minds and thoughts off of this ultimate truth, because it is the ultimate truth. There's a bloodline posterity. They have privity of blood. That's in contract. That's in law. That's in the Treaty of Paris. That's in Supreme Court rulings. And it makes perfect common sense. It's common sense. We're the owners of this nation. We're the owners of the government. We put it in place. We put it in place. So we need to take it back. We need to straighten it out. Posterity. I could say this over and over and over, and I'll keep trying to say it over and over in as many ways as I can until it sinks into more and more people. But that's where we're at. Tave, I didn't see any hands, I mentioned earlier, but, I appreciate you being here, Tave. Nick in Texas, also, thanks for stopping in. Jen, I appreciate you coming in on behalf of Grant. If anybody else on here has anything to say, feel free to come on and say it. Otherwise, I'll just end the meeting. Next week, we'll have hopefully Grant on again. and go over some of these issues again and again and again and again. Thank you to Tave for his contribution, his membership to the organization. Thank you to Clint, who was with us earlier from North Carolina, for his contribution and membership to our efforts, as well as to Grant and, of course, myself and my son. I'll ask for anybody that watches this video, if you're posterity, please consider supporting our efforts either through a donation or through the membership. Donations can be in any amount. The membership fee, it's just, hey, it's an annual membership fee to say, yeah, I'm committed, I'm part of it, here's my assistance, and you'll be learning with us as we move along. As the monies grow, they will grow in an account that will be properly, measured, properly, controlled by a committee. For proper expenditures, there'll be accountability for all of the money that comes in. I'm hoping for it to grow substantially, so that we can say we have an organization of 1 million posterity members here and a large bank account, so that if we need to fly to the world courts and argue our points, we can do it, type kind of thing. That's where we're headed with this. So I guess that's all I could say. Anybody want to say anything? If not, I'll end the meeting. Hey, Joe. Good to see you, man. Welcome.
What's going on? How you doing?
Good, good. Yeah, we addressed quite a few things tonight. Grant wasn't able to make it on. He had his friend Jenny come on and share some thoughts. She's been with him since 2010, and you can watch this video, I guess. But hold on a second, because Tave had his hand raised. Go ahead, Tave. Appreciate that.
How you guys doing?
Good, brother.
Pretty good. Yeah. Hey, when you were talking about, now I already forgot the word you used. Started with an F, for what they were calling us as part of, not like the corporation.
Okay,
but
right. A property and franchise.
No, franchise. Yes. How does their definition of franchise play out that early in time? I mean, I'm just curious to know about that. And then I had two other things I wanted to tell you.
Right. Well, that would be a good question for Grant. He probably knows when that came into play.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I mean, you could look up the lawful definition of the word franchise.
Right.
You're probably at a point where you might want to buy yourself some Black's Law Dictionary, Dave.
I got one. I just bought the 12th edition.
Awesome.
Cost
Yeah.
me $100. Yep.
There's a lot of the government that's currently in place, the federal government that's currently in place, is absolutely violating the Constitution. They're doing unconstitutional things, and they're committing fraud constantly. We know that. That's a fact. They've been getting away with it because they became the sovereigns, and the true sovereigns, which is the posterity, need to collectively get together. Let's unite, organize, and speak out and regain our rights, privileges, and immunities, because only we can re-inhabit the republic. Only we can reoccupy the seats of the republic.
I can't do the posterity thing because I don't have that lineage. But what I can do is put the screws to these bums for trying to have been robbing us all blind. We shouldn't have to go work, pay such high price taxes on everything, and struggle to live on our property. It's supposed to be ours.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, first of all, you are doing the posterity thing simply by being on our side and supporting our efforts, brother. So
I do that.
Yeah, you're with us, and you'll reap the blessings. And that kind of goes to one of the things I was going to start discussing earlier that I got away from when we were talking about rights, and how there's going to be these people saying, well, just because I'm not related to George Washington, I don't have rights. People come up with all this confusion about things.
Right.
The simple fact of the matter is, I started mentioning earlier when I was talking about the conversation I was having with Grant today about the Supreme Court's ruling that people can have a right to political self-determination. That doesn't mean that they can become a posterity with all rights, privileges, and immunities. That's not possible. It's privity of blood. I mean, my father created the house, but you can,
like a will.
You can be here,
come over
and you
part of your will,
and you can have rights, and you can no longer be frauded, because now you've got the righteous people that are controlling that government. Again, we have a fraudulent government that's treating the sovereigns like slaves. When those slaves are set free and they become sovereigns and they can put that government back in place, there won't be such abuses. That's the plan. That's the idea. So,
Right.
you know, I think one of the things I was going to say is with regards to, let's say, the David Strait thing of rescind your 14th Amendment citizenship, right? Revoke
Right.
14th Amendment citizenship. If the Republic, if and when the Republic is inhabited properly by posterity, there'll be a process where anybody can be grafted into that society. It would be like
Right.
there's always going
grandfather-
to be there's always going to be see this is one of the things I really want to discuss. I almost don't want to get into it now because we're so late in the video and I don't want to make this video too long. Maybe next time I'll talk about it. It's a real interesting thing about sovereignty. I made the point earlier about this person that sent me a text. Well, this ought to be interesting since there's no such thing as personal sovereignty. In the realms of government, there are. It's just that simple. In the confines of governments constructed by man, there are rulers, there are leaders, there are sovereigns. It's just that simple. There's the principal, there's the agent,
people that
there's the
created
master,
it.
there's the slave. If you're operating in the construct of a government, that's just all there is to it. You're either the master or the slave. You're the principal or you're the agent. You're the sovereign. You're the ruler. You're the one it's like when we look back at the kings, we know there were good kings, there were righteous kings, and there were bad kings. So if we can have actually a righteous,
building a house. It's like framework for a house. The main people put it together. They set it up. They put it under roof.
right,
But then they let other people they can come in and they can be part of it. They can rent from it, but they can never own it.
exactly. And let me say this, Dave, because this goes to, again, that aspect of the people that want to say, well, who's anybody to tell me what I can or can't do? I'm a sovereign. Well, number one, again, more power to you if you want to get your backpack and your Birkenstocks and travel on around the world.
You may find out that's not the way you wanted to go.
Right. I mean, as far as rights, you'll have none. Privileges, you'll have none. Immunities, you'll have none. Civil rights, you'll have none. I mean, you can claim you're a sovereign, but you're still going to run into the constant, as soon as you go into a government domain, a government territory, you go into a nation that's based on a government. So for the people that say we don't need government, this is an interesting one too, because there's a lot of people out there now that really, I would put them in that category of the ones that are wearing the Birkenstocks, that are into the health food, which I'm into also, but there's a certain class of people that are all about the peace, love, and we're all one happy world, and we don't need government, the big bad government, we don't need government, we don't need government. No, government needs to exist. It needs to exist because there will always be human beings who are ruthless, immature, irresponsible, violent, out of control, mean, cruel, sick.
I know what you're saying. Yeah,
demented.
what you're talking. I had to tell somebody the other day. I go, you don't want, you want to defund the police, you want to choke the police down, but yet you want to offer sanctuary to invaders into this country that cause nothing but problems for the police department that's underfunded, undermanned. I go, but yet you think the police are the problem because they have to do certain things in order to police criminal. The bad people are going to come. They're not going to go away. And if you don't have that lady with the weights of justice and the scales, you've got a bad time coming. You've got social unrest and death is eventually the end of it. Yeah, you've got to have that structure.
Right. Now, there's a spiritual aspect to this, too. I mean, let's just throw it out there. I mean, that's why the whole concept, whether you believe in God or not, I don't care if you do or not, if you believe in heaven or hell, whatever your theories or concepts are about that. And I'm saying this to anybody that watches this video, anybody in the world. The bottom line is the idea of, the afterlife or heaven or going to heaven and not burning in hell. The concept behind all of that is that there's a better place than here that people can evolve to spiritually, they can move on to, so that they don't have to come back here, they don't have to be here. If you want to incorporate the reincarnation theory, there are people that deserve to come back here, but there are people that can grow, learn, mature, grow
Yeah.
up, overcome. And the Bible talks about it. It says, he who overcometh, the same shall be saved. In other words, we're all here to live and learn, and we can overcome. We have to overcome. If we overcome our weaknesses, if we overcome and we can tame and tackle our body and our cravings and our desires, and we can be responsible and mature and trustworthy, and we can prove ourselves worthy, then God can put us in another place. Call it
You can go
heaven,
to the next
call it
level.
another
Yeah.
dimension, call it whatever you want. But if you don't
Promotion.
get there, if you don't get there, you're coming back here.
You come back. That's right. Yes, you got to return. You've got to finish school before you get the job that requires the degree that you don't have.
Right.
You've
So
got
this,
to finish it. Yeah.
so this correlates to even when you're here, there has to be a government in place, because there will always be in this world people that are sick, mean, cruel, out of control, violent, sick, demented, untrustworthy, crazy, psychos, all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
So for there to be structure, you have to have a government. But the government itself has become fraudulent and corrupt.
They
So
become the ones that they're trying to control, or they
right, and
should
this
be
goes
in
to the
charge
point
of
I
it.
made
Yes.
earlier, that the founding fathers did state that this nation, the United States of America, was for a religious people. The republic was created for a religious people, a righteous people, a godly people. It was created by godly people for godly people. And there's so many ungodly people in the United States of America to begin with that, sorry, you have to be dealt with. Just like God is going to deal that, take that concept, he's going to deal with the righteous and the wheats and the tares and put some in hell and put some in heaven concept. Well, you know what? On this earth, it's going to be the same thing. There needs to be a government in place that's going to deal with the righteous and their rights, privileges, and immunities, and the evil, wicked, criminal element that are going to not only not be worthy of having rights and privileges and immunities, but they're going to be subject to consequences and disciplines.
The government isn't put here to deal with people. The government is put here, placed here to restrain sin, the sin of the people. It's not here to deal with the people. The people are the government. We, the people, are the government. The government doesn't deal with us.
I'm not sure.
I'd have to agree with that, Joe. I would say we are not the government. We're the farthest thing from the government. Look how corrupt they are.
Yeah, let Joe expand upon that or clarify, because he seemed to have an issue with the use of a term, deal with.
Well, you said the government's here to deal with us. The government is here to deal with us. That's what you said.
Well, the government's put in place by people, by men, in order to have an apparatus in place to deal with the variances of humanity. You know, they have to deal. They have to
what's
deal
the
with
functions of the federal government. What are the functions of the federal government? There's only 5 functions: protect the borders, right?
Wait, when you talk, now you're narrowing it down to just the federal government. I'm talking about government in general. The police are government, jails are government, mayors
absolutely.
Are government, laws.
Those are institutions of government. Those are institutions that are created by the legislative branch.
Right, but their institutions are parts of the government. Now, when you're talking about the federal government, if you want to just isolate it to that, the federal government itself, if it's corrupt, that just bleeds down into all the others, which it's going to bleed down into all these different agencies that they create that are also now corrupt. It's like the corruption.
Well, those agencies are unconstitutional. You know, what? The FBI is unconstitutional. The ATF is unconstitutional.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The federal government has been violating the Constitution left and right.
Some of those have to be implemented in order to maintain the rule order. You know, they have to do that because your senators and congressmen are not going to police the streets or the crimes that are committed, because by free will that we've been given, some people just have no effing sense to understand that if you live by the laws of nature that are simple and do what you to keep dignity and moral and self-respect, then all these other agencies wouldn't be needed. But then you find out that the congressmen and Senate, yes, they do put these other places or other agencies in place for corrupt reasons because they see the monetary value in order for them to run them and what they are capable of accumulating through an agency that is not theirs. They're not the Congress. A lot of these congressmen and senators, I bet you have their hands so filthy with CIA and this you said stuff, hands on, it's all them. They're the ones that are getting the voters, us, the people, to put them in place in order to project and to move forward these things that they collect all this money on. But when it comes to policing them, they want nothing to do with it. That's why they give it to these other agencies and let them run amok. And it's terrible.
Well, I don't think the voters put anything into place because the election system is a fraud. So it doesn't work. I mean, it's all. I mean, it's broken. The only reason why Trump got in there because he had 500 lawyers across the country monitoring the polls. Otherwise, Trump wouldn't have won.
But at one point, it wasn't. In the beginning, it wasn't like that. There was an honest setup here, a structure, a framework to go by. That's why Franklin said, "We've given you a constitutional republic. Can you keep it?" That means, can you keep it simple? That doesn't mean 5 million codes, 5 million statutes, case law out the ass for things that just don't make any sense. But yet, that's the simplicity of everything that we've lost. It shouldn't be this hard. Shouldn't really be this hard.
Yeah. And again, the only way to fix that is for the posterity, who are the rightful owners of this country. They own it. They're the owners. That's a fact. That's the law. That's reality. They own it. They're the owners, the posterity. Wake up, posterity.
Well, I don't think they own it. They don't own it.
They own it. They own it.
No group of people own the government.
They own it. They own it, Joe. They own it, Joe. They're the owners. Yes.
No way.
Yes, they died for it. They fought for it. They died for it. They own it, and they did it for themselves. And
they fought for all people, for all the people here to have the life, liberty,
no,
they endowed by our Creator.
No, they didn't say that. No, hold on, Tave. Joe, hold on. Tave, hold on. Joe, hold on, Tave. Joe, the founding fathers did not say, "We established this nation for ourselves and all the people in the world that want to come here." That's not what they said.
Yes, they did. If you read we went over this a few shows ago. Yes, it's for all the people that come here to enjoy the blessings and liberty.
They established this nation for themselves and their posterity. That's what they said.
How are you going to alienate an entire population of the country? How can you do that?
You can say that
they're not entitled to the life of the immunities.
Go ahead, Tave. Go ahead.
Here's all I want to say, Joe. You're looking at it too modernized. Okay, what happened is the people that came over here and did and conquered and made the deal with the king that their family, their lineage, they're the ones that died. They're the ones that were at war. It wasn't for everybody else. It's just like a will. Your cousin 5 times out removed doesn't get to move into your house that your dad had built, let's say with his hands, that you live in, because it was part of the family. That's not how that works. See, the direct lineage, and it stops. I don't know where exactly. I'm sure Grant knows, or Mike probably has a better idea. But after the 13 colonies, then you start to see things get brought forward to make everything available for, like the grandfathering of stuff in. Prior to that, absolutely not. It's a will of the people that fought and died for this country to their families of this land that they own through the kingship. And
so you're going to say the veterans of World War II aren't entitled to anything in this country? They didn't fight for this country?
The veterans, all the veterans, hold on.
And World War I?
Yeah. First of all the veterans that fought for any war were unfortunately brainwashed, programmed, indoctrinated poor souls that had been lured in to these godless, useless wars that were for no other reason than to serve the crooked, evil powers of this world and the bankers who funded it. That's all.
What about
Mike
the Civil
even
War?
said, Mike and Grant both said at the very beginning, I'll never forget this. There's going to be some pissed off people when they find out that just because they think they did what, like you're saying, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, they're not the ones that are entitled and have the right to the posterity. That's who's going to be pissed. Am I right, Mike?
Let me interject on that, Tate, because the vast majority of the men that were in World War I and World War II were posterity. And that's one of the reasons they had the war, was to kill them off, because they want to kill off the posterity. But many of those those veterans have family, and they are posterity.
That's true. That's very true. But like Joe's thinking that just because you fought in Afghanistan or you fought in Iraq, just like myself.
Well, yeah, all right.
So, what were
let
they
me
swearing
talk.
to, Tate?
Hold on,
When they swore an
So
oath
let me make my point now.
What were they swearing an oath to then?
Let me make the point now that I wanted to make to Joe. See, here's the thing. See, my patriarchal grandfather is my father. It's the same thing. It's blood, direct blood. He had a son who 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 had me. That blood, that man, he died. He gave his life. He gave his wealth. He gave his farm. He gave everything he had to have this land. So for anybody to assert that Jose can come over here from Venezuela, and because he came over to America, now he's an American. And because he's an American, he's entitled to all the same rights, privileges, and immunities.
No, he's not. But the colonials that came over here, the European descent people are. Yeah, the Venezuelan that came over, he's not entitled to anything. No.
Right. So we're edging close to you understanding the big picture here and not being at odds and thinking that we're somehow wrong here. We're edging towards getting you there, because that's the first step. You acknowledge that there's a greater weight to the blood that died and gave the life to build the country and establish it, who are sovereigns, versus Jose, who comes over from Venezuela or Mexico today, or a year ago, or 30 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 150 years ago, who had nothing to do with the establishment of this nation.
Right. A lot of people came over here to fight and left what they had in Europe, England. The people that stayed over there and decided not to come fight don't have posterity.
Right.
They come over after the fact, and then they're welcomed into what they should have been involved with, but for whatever reason they didn't. And that's where the people I think that Mike and Grant are talking about are going to be pissed off, because they think that they are entitled to it, but yet they didn't put forth anything to lose for it. So you're not entitled to it if you haven't put your life on the line like some of the families did to come over here and set it up.
Right. And it's all.
What about the farmers? What about the farmers that didn't fight in the Revolutionary War? They're not entitled to anything? But they were here when the Constitution was adopted? Or what about the people that were here before the Revolutionary War? They're not entitled to anything because they didn't fight?
The people that were subjects to the king, those that were subject to the king, that said this to the king, and they fought, they died to establish the nation, they established that nation for themselves and their posterity. That's what they did, period. There's no arguing that. That's what they did, and they won, and it's their nation. They own it. So time went on, and other people were coming in. They knew that other people were going to come in. The Supreme Court knew that other people were coming in that weren't posterity.
So you say George Washington, John Adams, Jefferson, they said they thought that they owned America. They never thought they owned America. That was the case. George Washington would have been gladly to be king.
They of course they knew they owned America. They knew it was their nation.
No, they didn't own it.
Of course they owned it.
Own their farms. They may have owned the land that they had.
That's why the Federalist Papers were addressed to the people of the state of New York, because the people of the state of New York were the owners.
If you heard my son, he said that's why the Federalist Papers were addressed to the people of the state of New York, because they were the owners of the state of New York. So there's the states.
It's like draft
It
dodgers.
doesn't say that nowhere in those Federalist Papers. It doesn't say only those people own the state
Of
of New
course,
York. It does not say
of
that.
course they own it. See,
No.
when I guess part of the problem you have is you're thinking in terms of as if I own all of America because I'm posterity. There are posterity that own at that time that the states and the people were one and the same. That was their state, and the people were the state. That was their land. That was their property. They own it, and they owned it for themselves and their posterity. So as time went on, we know that without even getting into the bankers and all the infiltration that took place later on, where they completely took over and corrupted the government and cast a net over even the posterity, saying that they're 14th Amendment citizens when they're not. If you back up, and this is where again you cannot fully understand or appreciate the gravity of all of this unless you understand it from the beginning, the roots, everything that took place, what happened then, who it happened with, who it happened for, what took place, and then what changes came and why they came and what was happening to address those changes as time went on, which is why you'll find several Supreme Court rulings where there had to be Supreme Court cases over issues because these issues were being brought up. Well,
my ancestors owned land in Pennsylvania during the Revolutionary War. I trace back my lineage all the way back to 1642 in this country. Okay, so I don't own. I can't say I own the state of Connecticut or Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania, when other people claimed land there too. I mean, I can't say I own that land.
Joe,
As a group,
anybody whose posterity are the blood owners of this nation. This nation was established by a group of men who established it, obviously by way of common sense, let alone law, for themselves and their children and their children's children, i.e., posterity. For ourselves and our posterity, we ordained this for ourselves and our posterity. We died, we gave everything for ourselves and our posterity. This is our land. We own it. We're the sovereigns here. This is our land. Now, obviously, at that time, there were states and they had their apparatuses in place to govern their states. And as time went on, that's all been convoluted. But we can't say that there's two things we can't say. Number one, we can't say that somehow the posterity that were blood related, that have privity of blood because their parents created this land, don't have it anymore. We also can't say that people can just come in here and simply because they're an American. I moved to America. I'm an American now. I wave my flag. Don't tread on me. And I got all the rights as equal to anybody else. So it really comes down to the fact that there's just some separating realities. And here's one example to try to make the point. The only people that can own land here, that can own title, what is it called, Josh? That can have what title? Allodial title. Thank you.
Allodial and land patent, and most states today don't recognize that.
They don't recognize it for a 14th Amendment citizen, Joe. They have no choice but to recognize it for a posterity who's making a claim on it.
Well, let me ask you this then. Let me just say, the founders, when they meant the United States, they referred to posterity. They meant the future generations, all generations that migrate.
Wait. See, this is where you went off.
It's in the preamble of the Constitution, Mike.
No, it's not. This is where you went off. You made a statement when they said for the posterity, they meant for all the people that come to America. See, you contradicted yourself. Because now you're saying that Jose that just came off the bus from Venezuela.
It said generations, Mike. What does that mean?
You put in your sentence.
I didn't put it. That's what the document. That's what the historical documents say from the library.
Well, number one, it doesn't say that. But even if it said that,
it does say that.
I'm generations away from my great grandfather, my patriarchal grandfather. I'm that generation he's talking about.
Right, it's just like in Britain and in the Kings. You have these clowns over there today still have that right to the kingship because of that lineage. Now, it doesn't mean everybody else around in that country gets that opportunity. It
Right.
stays within that. It's like a family will.
Right.
So does it
Exactly.
stop at- Here's my question, Mike. After say the 14th state, where does the line become drawn as far as we know of what the papers have been drawn up, where they made the choice and said exactly how they said it? Do they stop and say, okay, this is the cutoff point? Is it like the 14th state then coming in? It's
No,
kind of just
that's a great question,
Well-
actually, Tave. Josh, do you happen to know? Because Grant's referred to it, that all the states joined the union. So, if you guys remember this would be a good question to ask Tave too, because I don't know when they joined the union. I know most of them joined pretty long ago. But in theory, let's say, look it up, Josh. When did Florida join the union? Can you look that up for me real quick? Let's just use Florida as an example. When did Florida join the union? And what year did the
so. I
state
guess
Florida?
my question then would be, when is the
Because
the
Florida,
deciding
one
part
of
of
the
the
younger
union?
states.
Yes.
So you
When-
bring up a really good point there, Dave, because if it could be
March 3rd, 1845.
all right, 1845. That was longer ago than I thought, but still, that's 1845. So
Republic was still intact.
Republic was still intact, number one. But it is interesting because we could say where in 1808, right, the judge simply ruled that it was ipso facto, point of fact, that anybody prior to 808 was a state citizen being posterity for all practical purposes, because the only people that were here were posterity and they were state citizens because there was no other citizenship other than that. So they were state citizens prior to 1808, which was when they did away with, right? They did away with the Naturalization Act, Josh?
So
1790 started in 1790. I think it was 1808 that it was finalized. I think maybe 1803.
it's in the Constitution.
I think 1808. So
Yeah.
So that's one marker we can look at. But it's an interesting point to say, well, if the state of Florida became part of the Union in 1854, then it would be safe to say that anybody in that state at that time who's joining the Union
Had posterity.
would be posterity. So they could come over. Well, then again, no, because posterity was the founding fathers and the ones that established the nation. So I don't think they'd be posterity. They would be, what is it called when you're not in the, maybe this is where this point about being a state citizen, if you're in body politic, is legit or no? Because
Can we maybe
my son
look at-
tended to think that an inhabitant and a state citizen was the same. I'm thinking that a state citizen is the one involved in the body politic, like Eric Dingus would often say. Whereas an inhabitant is the person that simply lives here. They're not involved in the body politic, but they simply live here. So you could be an inhabitant of the republic.
Yeah.
A
Can we
state
maybe
citizen
look
would
at
be
when
involved in the body politic, but then a posterity is actually the blood owner. They're the owners. They're the ones that established the nation. So these are the things that we're endeavoring to unravel, because the ultimate point here is that we do know that this whole thing has been overlooked. The fact that there was a group of men that created the nation for themselves and their posterity. Can't get around that. There's no, the posterity meant generations of Americans for eons to come. That doesn't make any sense, because first of all,
But that's what's written, Mike. That is written.
Oh,
And
number one,
documented.
that's not what's written. Number one, that's not what's
Yes,
written.
it is. It's in the Library of Congress. It's even in the
well, let me
Constitution.
ask you this,
What do you-
Mike. How about
that's not
this?
what's
It was
What if we look
established
at
justice
and
to
saw
ensure
what the-
domestic tranquility for the common defense of all America.
It doesn't
Okay,
say
even
that.
the citizens born after.
It doesn't say that.
Yes,
You're
it
reading
does.
words
It's in
into
the
it.
Federalist Papers. Yes, it is.
Maybe Josh would
right.
know this one.
Hey,
Could
Josh.
we look at and see
And letters and writings
the
from the
king
founders,
himself-
fathers.
who the king himself deemed and actually documented he was at war with? And would it be these 13 states, the colonies, and therefore after that it stops. You see what I'm saying, Mike?
Right.
Going by what the king actually
Right.
thought for his actual who he was at war with, which is
Right. We
within
we can certainly dissect this thing and get down and which is fine to do. You're probably going to need to do it for some people so they can wrap their head around it or accept it, because some people, they just have a hard time accepting it until you give them enough.
James Madison, in a letter dated September 6th, 1789, and Jefferson discussed the ideas of the earth and that belongs in the use of I don't know what the hell the meaning of that word means, to the living, implying that each generation holds the world in trust for those who come after.
Each generation of
say.
posterity. Each generation of posterity.
It doesn't say posterity, Mike. You're
It
adding
does
the
say
word posterity
posterity.
where it's not. And
It
it's
says
not there. Look,
posterity.
that is in a letter from James Madison.
Right, but the letter is not the Constitution or the preamble to the.
But it's what they intended. The founding fathers intended.
Well, the
doesn't matter
Supreme
if they
Court
intended
ruled. The Supreme Court ruled that you must consider.
Who cares what the
to
Supreme
put it
Court
in
rules?
context.
They
I
don't
intend, hey,
control the law.
all these guys,
They're
hey,
right
they all
to rule
intended
that.
something different, but they all came together with one conclusion and put it down and documented it. It
Supreme
doesn't
Court
make a
can't
difference
change
what
the
their
Constitution.
intentions were, because
No,
nobody
the court
didn't agree
doesn't
on
change the
everything.
Constitution. The court says that you must consider common law and you must consider the preamble to the Constitution when considering how you're going
Yes,
to read
and
it.
the letters and intent of the founders, that's why they wrote letters to reinforce why the Constitution was written and who it was for and
Right.
what it
So
was
again,
intended to apply.
Joseph, so again, to point out your flaw and the contradiction you're making, I asked, what you just said there implies that Jose Martinez just came off the boat, but he's an American now. And because he's an American,
He becomes a 14th Amendment citizen then.
thank you. That's right.
Okay.
And the 14th Amendment citizen is not equal to posterity.
That's right.
That's correct. But everyone else that's not a 14th Amendment citizen is.
Well, that's when we have to figure out that date. And up until that point,
The Civil War, when it was created unlawfully, the 14th Amendment, because it was never really truly ratified anyway. The Civil War is where this all started. This whole argument about citizenship.
Right, but
When
also
they changed the meaning
but
of
no,
citizen,
no,
when
what-
they
no, but-
changed
but-
the meaning of person and citizen.
No, but the people that founded this nation, they founded it. Not people in future they founded it for themselves and their posterity, which is their bloodline. Period. You can't, I mean, that's not people. You could try to argue that or try to rationalize or say no, but all generations and all. No, that those men established this nation for themselves and their posterity. Period.
and
Now-
at no time did they ever
now-
think they were going to have a civil war with their own family members.
Exactly.
Oh,
That's a good
yeah.
point. Yeah.
No point they ever thought that. They were at war with the king in another country. They thought,
In the
that's the
Civil
biggest
War?
problem.
The Civil War was we were fighting our own brothers.
Well,
That's
even
what
the
I'm
War of
saying.
1812, they tried to come over and do it again.
Yeah.
They didn't. We started that war. They started it. We attacked England. That's why they came over in 1812 and
Yeah.
burned down the White House.
No, that
We
was
started
them.
that.
Well, they started it.
No, they didn't.
You can
We
almost do
started.
this another way also. If you look at this, like, let's say we don't
Who
talk about,
funded the war?
let's talk about Spain. Let's say this,
But still, the people here started it.
Spain.
Whether they were influenced by foreign bankers or not, we still start. The people that were here started the conflict with England. England didn't come over here first.
No, they didn't
Whether
start it.
whether they enticed them to or not, still the first attack came from the people over here.
Yeah, but the people that were here were
Enticed is a
tyranny
it's
from what
not
the
a strong
government
enough word.
there.
But
If
I
I
mean-
try to provoke you into a fight, Mike, and you come to my house and start a fight with me, who started it? Just because I antagonized you, you still fought you through the first punch. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, antagonism could be part of it, but that's what the enemy does anyway. They do antagonize, they do stir things up. They're trying to they've been trying to create a war in this nation over the
So
last
then the king broke the agreement. Then, if they were over there antagonizing the agreement that the original founders had, then they broke the agreement. This
yeah,
agreement that you're saying that they had.
yeah, that's worth looking into also. Just, there's a lot of history that most of us don't know about. And that's what
Right.
we need to find
That's
out
what I was
about
thinking.
it
What
because
about
it's
Spain?
relative. It's
we
relative
have
to
our
the fact that there's a people in this nation that are privity of blood related to the founding fathers who by law and by treaty have privity of blood, rights,
Yep.
privileges, and immunities. And the Supreme Court has ruled that way because it's common sense. It's obvious. It should be.
What case was that they ruled that way?
Oh, there was a few actually. I don't remember all of them off the top of my head.
Well,
But
give me one. You got one?
Josh, what can you cite me a case?
Is
What-
it on the website?
Not yet. We're gonna be putting a lot of stuff on there very soon. Can you cite me a case, Supreme Court case where they were ruling about what was it again, Joe? About
Who's entitled to the bloodline? That only the bloodline of the founders were entitled to the posterity of this nation.
There's no court case that explicitly says that, but when you read 10, 12, 15, 100 court cases and you put it all together, then you can make that determination on your own. But
No, you can't.
yes, you can. All right, let me put it to you this way: Minor versus Happersett. Anybody that was here prior to 1808 was ipso facto a state citizen. Ipso facto. That means without a doubt, indefinitely.
I know what it means. I've seen your legal documents, and you got a lot to learn when it comes to drafting legal documents.
Right, and then you could throw out the other.
Okay.
See, this is the point.
He says there was no question as to their citizenship. No
Right.
question.
And the point is he's using that one case.
I've got 3 cases in the federal courts right now, okay, that have already gone past summary judgment, okay?
Right. But
So I know
let's
how to
stick on the
draft legal
subject, though.
documents. I know what case law means.
Right, but
all right?
the point is that Josh mentioned one case, but then you can mention another and another and another and another. They're all addressing the issues relative to posterity, relative to sovereignty being passed to the people. What case was that? Sovereignty.
It's expo
Prison
facto.
versus Georgia.
It's called expo facto.
If it comes down to it, this posterity, this whole thing, our Supreme Court has shit to say about it.
That's
In
right.
all actuality, this will have to go across the pond to the courts where the documents, the charters were drawn up for the beginning of it, because the Supreme
Yeah.
Court did
That's
it.
right.
You tell me that the courts in England are going to rule what the cases?
Absolutely, because they drew up
No
the
way.
charters and everything.
Yeah,
That's what they're
It got
basing
nothing to
everything
do with
on.
this country.
yeah, it
Oh
does
my
because
God.
if
It's
Yes, it
everything.
does.
No way.
Powers are in Europe. The world powers are in Europe.
right.
They-
100%.
I don't get. Well, listen, we're a sovereign country. So you're telling me we're not a sovereign country? Then we have to go by the
there's-
people
if there's
of
a
the world
conflict,
court.
if there's a conflict, if there's
No
a
way. No
what is
way.
it called again? A conflict,
We have a president, not a
a
king.
controversy. If there's a controversy that can't be resolved, if a million of us are saying the Supreme Court is they're violating the law, they're breaking the treaty, they're violating our laws and our rights and our privileges and our immunities.
We can't even win a driver's license case, and you're going to argue this? Come on.
We
Where
are
do you
we
think
are
it
going to
goes?
argue that. If we have
Joe,
to
what
argue
did
that,
the
we'll argue
Supreme
that
Court
within the
start
world. But the point is, it would have to be argued in the world courts.
Yeah,
No,
so
I
that's
disagree
what it
with you
is.
there. The world court has no binding on anything that happens over here. Nothing.
Of course they do.
Nothing.
Does the Magna
No
Carta
way.
have any?
Whatever the
does
world
the
court
Magna
says
Carta,
doesn't have
Joe,
any binding on the U.S.
Joe,
citizens.
does the
We're
Magna
a
Carta
sovereign
have
country.
anything to do with America?
Because it's called international law, Joe.
Yeah,
treaty-
but who
the Treaty
cares?
of
We're a
Paris,
sovereign
it's-
country.
the
But
Treaty
we're not a
of
sovereign
Paris-
country.
The Treaty of Paris is subject to international law if there's a controversy over it.
And no, you're wrong.
Joe,
You're wrong.
we do not have a
Yeah.
king and queen for that reason, because we are still owned by that monarchy.
Exactly.
That is the whole.
No
That
way.
is everything that nobody wants to understand. That wants to argue and fight about it, because that's how it got set up. That was the deal. Maybe behind doors, closed doors. I don't know. But
No,
the thing
no.
is, these people were given this country, this land. They were able
They
to
weren't
do.
given this land. They fought for it. They
Joe,
fought
in
for
an
it.
agreement.
British-
In an agreement.
The
Does the
the
Magna
British,
Carta mean anything to you?
The British royals are living among you right now, Joe, and their titles are Esquire.
So are Chinese. So are Chinese to communists. What's that mean?
Do you call Trump king?
You know,
There you
of
go.
course we don't have a king in America.
That's my point. What do you have?
We have a republic.
No,
We're supposed to have a republic.
No.
You have a CEO that works for a
Yeah,
corporation.
of Washington D.C. Yeah,
You have a
Washington,
CEO
D.C.,
that controls a
Columbia.
corporation that's controlled by the Crown of England. Whether you like it or not, that's just a fact.
Well, the corporation may be, but but listen, then you go back to the Civil War where all that happened, and
No,
that's
we're
why the
going back
republic was
before that.
restored.
We're going back before that. The deal that was made with the king, with the people that came over here to fight them. But the Civil War, that's the last of our concerns. That's our own infighting. That's useless in my mind. The problem is they did not let us have a kingship. They did not let us have what we thought was ours, but they give them the land and they make the deal and they say, okay, but you cannot be kings and queens. We have all of you under our thumb, and then files out through the birth certificate. All the shit that we talk about is a framework.
The only ones that are
built up by
the
this
king of the
king.
posterity, because those men were given equal footing with the king by the Treaty of Paris.
Yeah, that's the point. It was those men that established this nation.
And what about the Northwest Ordinance and all the other treaties after that and before that?
Well,
What do
that's
they
what I
mean?
was just saying. Now you got Spain. Let's say the stuff that goes on in New Mexico, Texas. That's a whole nother situation of wars that go on. That if it would have been the king of Spain, could have set up something like that. But it didn't happen that way because we had already established a government here that then adopted them into our union. We accepted that. We could have said, the 13 colonies could have said, no, you guys got to do your own shit. We got our deal here. This is what we're going to run with. You want to do your shit and go to war with them? That's fine. But then that's not how it worked out because they knew more people were coming from their homeland. They knew this, that America would be European.
And posterity of the founding fathers could technically go to the Crown of England and bring these matters forward in the British royal chambers. You know, that those that have the birthright. And I don't know if you're aware of this or not, Joe, but the fact that the Crown of England runs this world is something that was ordained by God himself. Because if you research history and you find out who the tribe of Ephraim is, and you're able to determine and know that that's the Crown of England, then you'll see why England has been given power to rule over this earth with an iron fist, because they are literally the tribe of Ephraim that God gave that power to in the Bible. So if God declares it, nobody's going to do anything to change it.
I disagree with you on theological.
You know,
You can disagree with me if you want to, Joe.
It's not fact. It's not fact. Where does the Roman Empire fit into this? In the Rome, in the Vatican.
Well, there's your problem right there. I was
Because
just
that's where your false prophet's going to rise up from.
Listen, you know who's got more power than the President of the United States of America? Any 33 and a third degree Freemason in these lodges that are from Europe. They run the world.
A good book to read on that would be A Woman That Rides the Beast by David Hunt. I recommend you read that book. It'll explain the Vatican Church.
Books. I'm not reading nothing no more shit like that. I want documentation by people that were living.
It gives you documentation in the book.
Well, hey guys, I'm going to stop the recording on this right now because we're just kind of going off on all kinds of talk. But next week, hopefully Grant will be on with us again. We're just going to keep doing this because we're going to keep fleshing out the truth regarding the fact that a certain men created this nation and they created it for themselves and their posterity. That's their words and that's treaty and that's.
Well, where are you going to bring this to address this then? Where are you bringing this to?
Well, you have to.
Wherever we have to, right? Well, if we have to.
Well, that's not an answer.
Well,
you said world court.
We don't necessarily
world court or Supreme Court.
We don't necessarily have to bring it anywhere. Right now is all we have to
Sure
do is
you
bring
do.
awareness.
You just can't talk on the internet and think that we're going to reestablish
Right now, all we
a
have to do is,
republic.
yes, that's all we have to do right now is bring awareness to the posterity so they know who they are and what they're entitled to. What they're entitled to is privity of blood, all rights, privileges, and immunities by law, by treaty, and by Supreme Court rulings.